Okay, so for my presentation technology thing, I can't remember what it's called now, but I chose to use a Prezi. And the reason I really was drawn to this one was I kind of liked the idea of a mind map. We use mind maps, like actual writing mind maps in class, because it's a really great way for students to kind of map out their thinking about certain things. So like we did one for integers and talking about the different rules for adding and subtracting and then multiplying and dividing. And so I really like the concept of having like a digital mind map. And I might kind of do this with my students soon, because I thought that this one was really neat. Anyway, so let's start the presentation. Let's see how it goes. Okay, I guess I have to have a watermark. I don't know what that means, but we'll find out. Okay, for my presentation, again, I chose to use the mind map form because I thought it was really neat looking. But I also chose to talk about collaboration with other teachers, which I really chose to interpret that as talking about PLCs and how important they really are. Okay, so just to PLCs and why we all should be using one, but what PLC really means is professional learning communities. And kind of what that looks like, we're going to talk about 5 different areas. First, okay, what is a PLC and kind of how it came about. The first thing is, PLC refers to professional learning communities. It's traditionally defined as an ongoing process when educators work collaboratively in recurring cycles of collective inquiry and action research to achieve better results for the students they serve. Now, that's a bunch of big, heavy words that, but what we're kind of gonna break that down as we talk today. But what it is, again, is where educators work together, okay, in timely cycles, so meaning every week, every month, whatever it happens to be for you guys, okay, of collective inquiry, where we're sitting together, we're talking, and we're discussing students, and then action research. So working together to figure out the best plan to get better results for our students, okay? So that's kind of the big thing about what PLC truly means, and that's the big dictionary definition. Well, not dictionary, this is not a dictionary definition, but this is the Google answer. Kidding, okay? So next though is kind of the history of what a PLC is. So schools really started changing after the turn of the century when people started realizing maybe we'd like our children to know how to read and do math. And so it's so they started, especially around the 1960s, started trying to do away from the one-room schoolhouse model. And that's when we really started seeing the models that we see now. So PLC, that term itself, has been around since the 1960s. It's been mentioned, it's been talked about, okay? But really it didn't start gaining popularity in schools until the year 1998, whenever there's a book that was published. It's called Professional Learning Communities at Work, Best Practices for Improving Student Achievement. And that came out in 1998. And the guys, Dufour, and Eaker, those 3 guys, they're the ones who wrote that book and really started popularizing and pushing the idea of a PLC. And so now, if we fast forward from 1998, that's 25 years, we have some very different looks at what PLC looks like. But really, again, a true PLC, one thing to remember today, true PLCs are, first, they're collaborative. They're also very specific. So while yes, PLCs can be multiple grades, especially at smaller schools where you have to be, they tend to be more content, area, and grade specific. So my PLC is I work with the 7th grade math department. Okay, but our building is big enough that we're able to do that. Some buildings are small enough that you have to work, say, I don't know. So you have to work with multiple grades or different content areas to achieve what you need to do. But truly, that's kind of what the big idea today is. PLCs, they work together, and they're working with people that are like-minded or subjected to them. Okay, next area. Why should we do PLCs? So the one big question, why on earth should we work with other people? Okay, that's kind of an interesting thought there. The purpose, though, of a PLC is to improve educators and allow them to collaborate with each other. One of the things we've always known, especially when we look at research, is that one of the best ways to learn something is to work with other people and to collaborate or, talk to people and work together. But it's also not just about us at this point. It's not just about, us as educators trying to decide, what is going to be, how can we improve ourselves, but how can we improve our student achievement, especially in the wake of things such as COVID, or when the first PLCs were coming about in the late 90s and the early 2000s, just these ideas that we're seeing our test scores starting to fall. So what are we going to do about that? And the purpose of PLCs is to improve educators so that way they can improve the student achievement and help our students be at a better grade level and to improve and be where they need to be. So that's that one. Another big thing about PLCs and why they're so important is that they're learning focused. No longer are we teaching in our own little bubbles, doing our own little thing. That's not the case. It's a collective responsibility for learning. We are collectively, or as a group, taking responsibility for each of our students. And we're working together to make sure that every single student is reached in some way so that way they can learn. Okay. Another big thing, there's 3 big objectives. Okay? Again, identify what they need to know, identify how to measure that growth, and identify what to do when they don't get it. So those are the big objectives and why we use PLCs. What do kids need to know? So the idea is look at the standards, because we all know, realistically, we can't teach all, 50 to 100 standards that some of us have every year. So what of those standards is actually the most important? What is it that they need to be able to go on to the next grade level and to be successful in the future? Okay, how are we going to measure our students' growth? How are we going to be able to tell that a student actually achieved that? Or did they actually just, did they pass the test because it was too easy? Or did they pass it because they genuinely understand what's going on? And then what do we do when students don't get it? So we'll go on more into that later, but that's the big 3 purposes of what a PLC will do. So let's talk next area. How do they work? There's 3 things that you need there's 3 big things to talk about whenever we want, to know how PLCs work. The first is that 1, they're collaborative. You must work with other people in order to be a true PLC. We're no more self-made banishments. And what I mean by that is we're not going into our classroom, shutting the door, and not allowing anyone in to help us or to help other people. One, that's not very, not very nice or Christ-like in this case, for those of us that are Christians. But it's not, I don't know, we are teachers, and I love to help people, even if it's an adult that needs help figuring out their Canvas course or figuring out this new Infinite Campus thing. It's not just, we're not banishing ourselves into a back corner and pretending, that we're all alone. That's not how teaching works anymore, and it's for the better. Because what I've learned more talking to other teachers than I ever could have learned just jumping feet first into the water and hoping I swim. So that's the biggest thing about PLCs, is that they're collaborative. You're working with other people. Now another big thing about PLCs that's important, is that they're timely. They need to meet on a regular basis. And you need to have an agenda and plans to work on a topic. We've all been to those staff meetings where nothing seems like they're accomplished, because we know what that's like. It's boring, there's no purpose, and we feel like we could be somewhere else. So why do we do it? Well, 1, because we have to, because it's our job, but also, how could we improve that for ourselves? We need to have actual PLCs that work together and are timely and actually have an agenda and have something that we plan to work on. They also need, the other big things there, is they meet regularly. It's no longer, we're saying, okay, we'll have the monthly math meeting, to decide what's going to happen. No, we need our PLCs work weekly together to make sure that what we're doing, we're on track with each other, but also, some teachers struggling or needing help with students, then how can we address that and how can we help each other? Okay, last thing that's big about PLCs is this word called norms. Okay, norms are really important. As a group, you and your PLC write what's most important. And for us, a lot of times that's 1, be on time and working together. Come prepared, do what's asked of you. And not only keeping those norms, but keeping them tightly. So working together and not keeping things the way that they need to be. Okay, this is what I call my big kahuna. What do we do with PLCs? Now we've got them. We've talked about why we have them and the history of them. We've talked about the purpose behind them. And now we're going to talk about what we're going to do with them. Okay? Again, I keep saying this word collaboratively. Teachers work better when they're working together. Okay? And we're working together in a timely way so that we can work and pool our resources, put everything together, see what's most important, and actually use that information. Okay, next, they're data driven. Okay, so we always know in the state of Missouri, we have the MAP test, okay? Or we use even just our tests that we have in class, or our assessments, even our formatives that we use, and we can talk about them. What do students need to know in order to be successful on those? Okay, and then how can we change our instructions or improve that instruction so the way students get it? And our last thing on there is RTI. So response to intervention. What are we gonna do for those students that don't get it? How are we gonna change our instruction going forward this year because our students didn't get what just happened? How can we change that, and how can we improve our learning? Okay. Another thing that PLCs do, there's 4 questions. I cut it off on the top, but that's okay, I'll fix it. Okay, there are 4 big questions that PLCs answer. And they don't always answer all 4 every time they meet, but they always address at least one. Number 1, what do students need to know and be able to do? What are we expecting on this next assessment? What do students need to be able to do in order to pass this assessment? Whether that be at 80% as our proficiency rate, or whether we want to set it even higher to get a 100% on this test, you need to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Okay? Number 2, how do we know if that student has learned it? Okay, this is talking about that assessment piece. Is our assessment addressing the things that they need to know, and is it going to be useful for us? Number 3, what are we going to do if some of the students don't learn it? So this is our intervention time. If they did not pass that test, how are we going to intervene so that way they can, learn the standard and still be successful? Then number 4, how are we going to extend that learning for students who are already proficient? So if we've got students who are already at that proficiency, whether that be 80 or 100%, how are we going to push them even further so that way they have that enrichment that they're needing? Okay, so those are kind of why, the big things. What do we do with the PLC? Okay, so in conclusion, why aren't we all doing this? And what are some setbacks to PLCs? So why might we not do stuff? Number 1, we don't understand the time it needs for students to learn. Okay, maybe we're pushing them too fast. Maybe we're doing stuff that is not, helping students, but actually hindering them. By the way, these 3 things that I got, they came from Solution Tree. And this is a big PLC training, and they push things like this to help PLCs be more successful. So one of the things they said is that we don't understand the time it takes for students to actually learn. So that could be a reason why they're not passing, or our PLCs are failing. Another thing they said, okay, our collective commitments or our norms are in writing only. We don't actually enforce the fact that we want people to work together. We kind of just sit there in our room and we pretend to talk to each other, or we talk, but it's all about stuff that's about, what we're doing this weekend, how I'm doing my hair, or how, doing things like that. So those collective commitments aren't actually being followed. And then also, we see we're going light on those 4 questions. We're not really talking about things, or we're not really working on them. Okay, so those are some of the reasons, maybe we're not doing PLCs anymore. And maybe that's why, we're thinking about that idea, how PLCs might fail. But finally, in conclusion, really talking, PLCs are really about taking teachers and getting them to work together, collaborate, and work with others so that way they understand and they can help each other be more successful. Okay, so we talked about what a PLC is, okay, why we should use it, how they work, and then, why we should be, how we put them in place, and then some downfalls to PLCs that we might see. So, thanks.